Hi everyone, and welcome to part 2 of my reflection shading tutorial. Now last time we went over the structure and how to kind of set up the form of a two-object still life that deals with reflective objects like these two glass ones that I used as an example last time. And what we're going to do is we're going to continue building on top of that with our values, or sometimes people just refer to it as shading, so how light works. This is assuming that you already know the core basics of basic shading and basic shading techniques. So I'm going to apply those to the reflective surfaces in this demonstration and show you how to really get into those details to make these seem reflective rather than flat shapes. Let's go ahead and get started. So what you'll need for today as far as supplies go is the drawing that you started last time. You'll need a normal school pencil, so that's a 2HB or an HB is fine. They often come in sketchbook sets. You'll need a dark pencil of some sort, so something in the B family. The higher the number plus B equals the softer and darker it will go. I prefer to use these ebony Prismacolor pencils. I've been using them since college and I like them very much. It's a nice dark pencil. And then what you'll need is something for blending. So this is a tortillon, or people call it a blending stick or a blending stump. It's just a little rolled up piece of paper. Or something that everybody usually has around the house is kind of like a soft napkin or a tissue of some sort for blending as well. It can't really be quite as detailed. You can sort of roll it into a point like this for the more detailed areas. But I'll show you where to blend and where not to blend, because sometimes people overblend and that's pretty terrible. And then, of course, for erasing any mistakes that you may make is an eraser of some sort. What you should do is start with the darker areas that you know are not going to be white at all. I usually start with the coarse shadows and cast shadows. Those will easily be the darkest values within your drawing. Lay them out with a light pencil at first. You can always make them darker later. Keep in mind that there will be very, very small segments that you need to plot out as well, and this can really help you track where your form is in the future, so don't disregard the small pieces. As you continue shading, something you have to keep in mind is that all of your lines should start to be incorporated into your values. So your value contrasts stand in for the form instead of actual literal lines. Sure, there are small pieces that you have to pay attention to that appear to be lines that are thinner or thicker, but really, for example, in this section right here, as I continue shading, if I start losing an edge, I have to decide what part is lighter or darker compared to each other so I can keep that edge. In this case, there's some reflected light on the right hand side that will help me keep the edge of my vase as I continue shading in the darker objects that are next to it, such as the cast shadow. You do want to follow your initial drawing, but there is room for improvement as you go along. Just keep in mind that if you shade something too dark, it is very difficult to get it back to straight white again. And that's where some artists do apply some other material like white charcoal or even some white gouache to really get those highlights all snappy. Easily get lost in the jungle of parts and pieces of something that's reflective. So take your time. As you keep shading, something that you might want to find yourself doing is protecting this side of your hand. You might have seen those people who have those nifty little gloves that go right here so you don't smear. But you don't need to invest that much. You can invest yourself in a piece of paper like this terrifying little drawing that my daughter did, and simply place your hand on it as you continue drawing. That way, if your hand is in contact with the paper and rubs on it, then you're not going to be rubbing off your first stages of your shading. Another thing you can do is place your hand like this, your arm like this, and then place your hand like so, and then keep on drawing like this over your drawing. It leaves a gap about this much, and you have to hold your pencil somewhere in the middle to keep drawing, so that's a good way. Also, you can also do a little pinky stilt. So if you kind of hold out your pinky like so, keep on drawing. That is a little bit more uncomfortable, but those are 3 different ways that you can avoid smearing your drawing before it's finished. Sorry, my camera crashed kind of in the middle of everything. So here we are about halfway done with the initial phase of shading. And really what it takes is an enormous amount of care to record each and every little part as you go. I'm still building up my values using my light pencil. I have not switched pencils yet. So don't be afraid to stick with the light pencil for quite some time and then switch to your darker pencil to lay in darker values in that second phase of kind of reinforcement and contrast creation. There's a lot more balancing that needs to be done. The thing that you have to keep in mind during the second stage is fine detail. Let no little shift of value go unnoticed and unmarked, and you'll come up with a lot more transparent or reflective looking texture. Speaking of texture, if you're doing something reflective such as these, which are smooth, it only makes sense to apply a smooth shading texture. You don't want to use cross-hatching or stippling or something else on a smooth surface. If you want to convey that it is smooth, you must use stumping or blending, as you might call it. That's where the use of the tortillon will come into play. What you want to do as you mark out certain regions, if you notice that you have too many strokes, for example, I do have some subtle stroke patterns in my background here, I can then take my blending stump and apply it in gentle little circles. You can use the side, you can use the point to get in there. But the place that I primarily use my blending tool would be within the smooth shapes themselves. Because the wall is a little textured in my example photo, I'm not going to worry too much about the small amounts of stroke patterns that I have in my background textures themselves. What I am going to worry about are areas like this that start to be a little ambiguous because of the rapid shifts between volumes. And I'm going to be very careful as I apply my blending, then I'm not doing it over the entire thing, only in the area in which I want to make solid and smooth. In those areas which are generally, I like to stick to kind of my mid-tone areas and along the edges of my major shapes, because if I overblend, what's going to happen is everything will become the same gray, and you do not want that to happen. You need those high contrasts of the core shadows and such to bring out the detail. It's time to start balancing things out and get a higher contrast, and that's where your darker pencil comes into play. I'm going to start laying into these darker areas that I know can be pushed a little bit darker, these core shadows, these cast shadows that I know are a bit darker, that are on the darker end of my spectrum. That's what I'm going to apply these to, and hopefully we'll end up with a snappy level of contrast between all the values in our drawing.
See the day I thought that I had finally moved along, and I had let you go so long ago, so long. This is not where I belong. So I wait for the shallow itch to pass, and I wait, hey, I'm okay, I don't need this anyway, I'm fine, it's yours and mine. Oh, I don't know what I was ever hoping I would find, but it's time for me to leave this all behind. Single thing I couldn't say, it didn't feel alright, but I don't wanna stay and I don't wanna fight all alone with my foolish appetite. So I wait for the shallow itch to pass, and I yours and mine. Oh, I don't know what I was ever hoping I would find, but it's time for me to leave this all behind. I don't have the heart to give away to you again. I don't have the stomach for it, no one ever wins. We had our fun, but I have sung this song to you. Here's my last refrain. Hey, I'm okay, I don't need this anyway, I'm fine, it's yours and mine. Oh, I don't know.
Other than some very minute details and maybe some slight refinements, this is pretty much a finished product here. I would say, it took me about maybe 3 hours or so to do this drawing, and if you're doing it with even more care, it might even take you longer. So there's no short way of going about this, except for the very careful observation of the very small bits of value within the drawing itself. I hope that you found this tutorial and demonstration helpful, and I sure hope that you go out and apply it to your own artwork to make some beautiful things. Alright, see you next time.